They are unique among the species of our galaxy. They maintain separate military organizations. What you defeated was equivalent to what most species would call a planetary police force. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Zextar's mind raced, trying to process this information. If what the ambassador was saying was true, then the fierce resistance they'd encountered, the desperate last stands, the willingness to ram damaged ships into Caltharian vessels, all of that had been from civilians. Where, he asked slowly, is their actual military? Unknown, the ambassador replied. Human military movements are difficult to track. They have a saying, the enemy should never see you coming. But Admiral, if I may offer some advice. The transmission cut out abruptly as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The tactical display lit up with new contacts, dozens of them, appearing at the edge of the system. But these weren't the hodgepodge collection of converted civilian vessels and outdated warships they'd faced at New Geneva. These were purpose-built instruments of war. Admiral, the sensor operator called out, his voice cracking with stress. I'm reading massive energy signatures. Ship configurations unknown, but the power output, it's unlike anything in our databases. Zextar moved to the tactical display, his trained eye immediately recognizing the formation patterns. These weren't the desperate defensive positions of the Colonial Defense Force. This was a fleet arranged for attack, for conquest, for the complete and total destruction of everything in their path. Sir, Veilthos whispered, the lead vessel is hailing us. On screen, the image that appeared caused several crew members to step back involuntarily. The human who faced them was nothing like the desperate colonial administrators they'd been negotiating with before the battle. This was a warrior. Her uniform was stark black with silver insignia, her hair pulled back in a severe military style. Her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had seen and commanded death on a scale that most species couldn't comprehend. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the Seoul Defense Corps 3rd Fleet, she said, her voice carrying an authority that made Zextar's spine stiffen involuntarily. You have attacked human civilians and destroyed a civilian installation. This is an act of war. Your Colonial Defense Force was military personnel, Zextar replied, trying to maintain his composure. They were armed, they fought, they were volunteers, Admiral Chen interrupted, her voice dropping to a temperature that seemed to chill the bridge. Shopkeepers, farmers, teachers, and their children, defending their homes with whatever weapons they could find. You slaughtered civilians, Admiral. The weight of her words hit the Caltharian crew like a physical blow. Around the bridge, Zextar could see his officers beginning to understand the magnitude of what they'd done. In Caltharian culture, attacking civilians was considered the deepest form of dishonor. But they had been told these were military forces. Now, Admiral Chen continued, you will face soldiers. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. The tactical display showed the human fleet beginning to move, their formations shifting with a precision that spoke of countless hours of training and coordination. These weren't the improvised squadrons of the Colonial Defense Force. This was a machine built for war. Admiral, the communications officer said quietly, we're detecting additional fleets entering the system. The humans appear to have been coordinating their response. More contacts appeared on the display. Ships bearing different insignia, different configurations, but all moving with the same deadly purpose. Zextar realized with growing horror that what they had thought was humanity's last stand had been nothing more than a holding action, a delay tactic to buy time for their real forces to arrive. How many? He asked. Still counting, sir. At least 300 vessels, possibly more. And Admiral? The officer's voice trailed off. What? Some of these ship classes. They're not in any of our databases. We have no idea what they're capable of. Zextar turned back to the viewport, watching as the human fleet approached with inexorable certainty. The debris field that had once been New Geneva Station drifted past, a reminder of what he had thought was victory. Now he understood the truth. He had not won a battle. He had simply announced to the galaxy that the Caltharian Empire was at war with humanity. And from the look of the force approaching his position, Humanity was very, very good at war. Sir, Valthos said quietly, what are your orders? Zextar stared at the approaching fleet, watching as they formed attack patterns that his military training told him were both beautiful and terrifying in their efficiency. He thought of Ambassador Quilnara's words, of the warning that had been cut short. He thought of the civilian defenders who had died protecting their homes, buying time for this moment. Prepare for battle, he said finally, and pray to whatever gods still listen that we live to see another day. The human fleet continued its approach, and with each passing moment, Zexatar understood more clearly that everything was about to change. The galaxy had been sharing space with a sleeping giant, and the Caltharian Empire had just woken it up. The real war begins. The first thing that struck Admiral Zextar about the human attack was its silence. No grand proclamations, no demands for surrender, no ceremonial challenges as was customary in Caltharian warfare. The human fleet simply arrived, positioned itself, and began the systematic destruction of everything in their path. Evasive maneuvers, Zextar commanded as his flagship shuddered under a barrage of weapons fire that seemed to come from impossible angles. The humans weren't following standard battle doctrine. They weren't engaging in honorable ship-to-ship combat. They were hunting. Sir, they're using some kind of coordinated targeting system, Commander Valthos reported, his forearms working frantically to maintain defensive systems. Every time we move, they're already anticipating our position. It's like they're thinking faster than we are. On the tactical display, Zextar watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. The humans didn't waste time with individual duels or tactical grandstanding. They swarmed each Caltharian vessel with precise, overwhelming force, then moved on to the next target. It was efficient, cold, and absolutely terrifying. Admiral, the communications officer's voice cracked with panic. The dreadnought Conquest of Stars is reporting critical damage. They're requesting permission to retreat. Denied, Zextar snapped. We are the Caltharian Empire. We do not retreat from... His words were cut off as the tactical display showed the Conquest of Stars simply vanishing from sensors. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving only an expanding cloud of debris and escaping atmosphere. How? Valthos whispered. That ship had shields that could withstand a supernova. How did they destroy it so quickly? The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice crackled over the communications system, speaking in accented but clear Caltharian. Caltharian vessels. This is Colonel Marcus Webb of the Sol Defense Corps Strategic Operations Division. You're probably wondering how we're cutting through your ship so easily. The image that appeared on screen was of a human male, younger than Admiral Chen, but carrying himself with the easy confidence of someone who had seen combat and emerged victorious. His uniform was different from the Admiral's, more practical, less formal. This was someone who got his hands dirty. The answer, Colonel Webb continued, is that you're not fighting a war. You're fighting an extermination. Your species made the mistake of attacking human civilians. That changes everything. We followed the conventions of war, Zextar protested. They were armed combatants defending military installations. Colonel Webb's expression didn't change. They were teachers and shopkeepers with hunting rifles, defending their children. But you know what? It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you've given us a reason to show you something we've been keeping hidden. The tactical display suddenly filled with new contacts, hundreds of them, emerging from what appeared to be empty space. Stealth technology that made ships invisible to Caltharian sensors. You see, Webb continued, every species in the galaxy thinks they understand warfare. They think it's about honor, or territory, or resources. But humans? We learned something different. We learned that war isn't about fighting. It's about winning. And we've had a lot of practice. The new human ships began moving, and their tactics were unlike anything in Zexatar's experience. They didn't form battle lines or maintain formation integrity. They moved like a pack of predators, striking from unexpected angles, using the debris from destroyed ships as cover, coordinating their attacks with a precision that suggested they were thinking as one organism. Admiral, Valethos said quietly, I'm detecting weapons signatures that don't match any known technology. They're using weapons we've never seen before. Because, Colonel Webb said, apparently monitoring their communications, these aren't standard military vessels. These are what we call shock troops. Ships designed for one purpose, to end wars quickly and decisively. As if to demonstrate his point, one of the new human vessels launched what appeared to be a standard missile at a Caltharian cruiser. The missile struck the ship's shields and seemed to dissolve into nothing. For a moment, the Caltharian crew probably thought they had successfully defended against the attack. Then their ship began to come apart from the inside. Nanite deployment, Webb explained casually. The missile contained several billion microscopic machines programmed to dismantle enemy vessels at the molecular level. We developed them for clearing asteroid fields, but they work remarkably well on ships that refuse to surrender. The implications hit Zexitar like a physical blow. The humans weren't just militarily superior. They were fighting with technologies that bordered on the horrific, weapons that could unmake matter itself. Sir, the sensor operator called out, I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the human command ship. I think they're preparing to fire some kind of super weapon. Not a weapon, Webb corrected. A message. The human flagship, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything in the Caltharian fleet, began to glow with an inner light. Energy patterns danced across its hull, and space itself seemed to bend around it. What you're seeing, Webb continued, is a gravity manipulation system. We can create artificial singularities, bend space-time, even relocate entire star systems if we need to. But we're not going to do that today. Today, we're just going to move your fleet. The sensation was indescribable. One moment, the Caltharian fleet was in the outer system, near the debris field of New Geneva Station. The next, they were somewhere else entirely, surrounded by structures that defied comprehension. Welcome to Sol, Admiral Chen's voice cut through the confusion. The human home system. What you're seeing around you are our orbital defense platforms. There are approximately 10,000 of them, each one capable of destroying a planet. Zextar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The structures surrounding his fleet were massive, clearly artificial, and radiating power signatures that made his most advanced ships look like toys. But more than that, they were old. The wear patterns, the accumulated space dust, the signs of constant maintenance, these installations had been here for centuries. How long? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. How long have we been preparing for this moment? Chen replied. Since we first detected other intelligent species in the galaxy, since we realized we weren't alone. Humans have a saying, Admiral. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We hoped for peaceful contact. We prepared for war. The truth was staggering. While other species had been focused on exploration, trade, and diplomacy, humanity had been quietly building the most advanced military force in the galaxy. They had been watching, learning, preparing for the day when someone would force them to reveal their true capabilities. The Colonial Defense Force, Zextar said slowly, understanding dawning, was never meant to win. It was meant to buy time, Chen confirmed. Time for our real forces to arrive. Time for us to assess the threat. Time for us to decide how to respond. Those civilians you killed bought us that time with their lives. The weight of those words settled over the bridge like a shroud. The desperate defense of New Geneva Station, the colonists who had died protecting their homes, the apparent defeat of humanity's forces, all of it had been calculated. A deliberate sacrifice to lure the Caltharian Empire into revealing their true intentions. Sir, Valethos whispered, what have we done? You've made an enemy of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, Colonel Webb answered. But you know what? You're not the first. There have been others. Species that thought they could take what they wanted from humanity. Would you like to know what happened to them? The tactical display shifted, showing star charts with vast empty regions marked in red. Systems that had once contained thriving civilizations, now showing nothing but dead space. The hegemony of Zatar, Webb said, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher giving a history lesson. They enslaved 3 human colonies about 50 years ago. Would you like to guess where they are now? The red zones on the star chart pulsed ominously. Entire sectors of space, empty of all life. The Vorthan Collective decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. They launched a preemptive strike against our outer colonies. That was 30 years ago. Anyone want to guess what happened to them? More red zones appeared on the display. The pattern was clear and horrifying. You see, Webb continued, other species play at war. They fight for territory, for resources, for pride. But humans? We fight for survival. And when we fight for survival, we don't stop until the threat is completely eliminated. Admiral Zextar found himself staring at the star chart, at the vast empty regions that had once been home to billions of sentient beings. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been fighting it, quietly and efficiently, for decades. Admiral Chen, he said finally, his voice hoarse. What do you want? What I want, Chen replied, is for you to go home. Tell your empire what you've seen here. Tell them that humanity is not as weak as they thought. Tell them that we are not victims. The human fleet began to move, forming a corridor that led away from the Sol system. But the message was clear. This was an escort, not a retreat. And Admiral, Chen added, if the Caltharian Empire ever attacks human civilians again, we won't just move your fleet. We'll move your entire species, permanently. As the Caltharian fleet began its journey home, Zextar couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The galaxy had been living in ignorance, believing that humanity was just another species struggling to find its place among the stars. The truth was far more terrifying. Humanity had found its place long ago. They had simply chosen to hide it until someone forced their hand. The Caltharian Empire had awakened something that had been sleeping in the depths of space, and now the entire galaxy would have to live with the consequences. Part 3. Humanity Unleashed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of the Caltharian fleet's return to their home system. Ambassador Quilnara stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species, her translucent form glowing with an inner light that reflected her emotional state, in this case, a mixture of fear and grim satisfaction. The situation has escalated beyond our worst projections, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. The Caltharian Empire's attack on human colonial installations has triggered what appears to be a complete mobilization of human military forces. The chamber erupted in concerned whispers and translated discussions. Most species represented here had little direct contact with humans, viewing them as a minor colonial power of little consequence. The reports filtering in from the outer systems were challenging that assumption in ways that made many uncomfortable. Ambassador, called out Representative Korth of the Tanuki Federation, his mechanical voice translator struggling with his species' rapid speech patterns. Our intelligence suggests the humans defeated a major Caltharian battle fleet with minimal casualties. How is this possible? The Caltharians possess some of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Because, Quilnara replied, we fundamentally misunderstood what humanity was. We thought they were a young species, struggling to establish themselves among the stars. We were wrong. They are an ancient warrior culture that has been deliberately hiding their true capabilities. The chamber fell silent. The implications of her words were staggering. If humanity had been concealing advanced military technology, what else had they been hiding? How ancient? Asked Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony Coalition. Our first contact with humans was only 200 years ago. They appeared to be a primitive species just beginning to explore beyond their home system. Appeared being the operative word, Quilnara said. We now know that humans have been observing galactic civilization for at least 1,000 years. They've been studying us, learning our weaknesses, preparing for eventual contact. What we thought was first contact was actually their decision to reveal themselves. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. 1,000 years of observation meant that humanity knew more about galactic civilization than any other species. They had been watching, learning, and preparing, while everyone else had been focused on their own affairs. The reports from the Sol system, Quilnara continued, indicate that human military technology is centuries ahead of our own. They possess weapons that can manipulate matter at the molecular level, ships that can bend space-time, and orbital defense platforms that could destroy entire fleets. But why hide it? Demanded Representative Mox of the Crystalline Collective. Why not reveal their superiority and claim their rightful place among the dominant species? Because, a new voice cut through the chamber, we learned long ago that being the strongest makes you a target. Every head turned toward the chamber's entrance, where a figure in a dark uniform stood waiting. The human was tall, with graying hair and eyes that held the weight of centuries of conflict. His uniform bore insignia that none of the assembled representatives recognized, but his bearing made it clear that he was military. "I am General Harrison Clark, representing the Human Colonial Authority," he said, walking toward the center of the chamber with measured steps. "I've come to address the Council's concerns about recent events." The chamber was dead silent. This was the first time a human military representative had ever addressed the Galactic Council. Most species had only dealt with human diplomats and trade representatives. "General," Quilnara said carefully, "the Council appreciates your presence. We have many questions about humanity's actions in the Caltharian sector." "I'm sure you do," Clark replied, his voice carrying an authority that made several representatives shift uncomfortably. "But first, let me clarify something. The forces that engaged the Caltharians were not our military. They were civilian defense forces." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. If civilian forces had defeated a major Caltharian fleet, what were human military forces capable of? "The Sol Defense Corps," Clark continued, "consists primarily of volunteers and reservists. They're trained to hold positions until our actual military can respond. What Admiral Zextar encountered was the equivalent of a local police force." "Then where," asked Representative Korth, "is your actual military?" General Clark smiled, and something about that expression made every being in the chamber suddenly aware of how vulnerable they were. "Everywhere." The chamber's main display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. At first it appeared normal: star systems, trade routes, the familiar patterns of galactic civilization. Then red dots began appearing, thousands of them, scattered throughout known space. "Each red dot represents a human military installation," Clark explained. "Some are small observation posts, others are fully equipped battle stations. A few are something else entirely." The scale was staggering. The red dots were everywhere, in every sector, around every major trade route, near every significant world. Humanity hadn't just been observing galactic civilization, they had been surrounding it. "For the past 1,000 years," Clark continued, "humanity has been playing a very long game. We've been watching, learning, preparing for the day when someone would force us to reveal ourselves. The Caltharians provided that day." "But why?" Ambassador Veltar asked. "Why such extensive preparation for war?" Clark's expression grew somber. "Because we know what war really is. Most species in this galaxy have never faced true existential threat. You've had conflicts, territorial disputes, resource wars, but you've never had to fight for the survival of your entire species. Humans have." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. What kind of history would create a species so focused on military preparedness? "Our planet," Clark continued, "has experienced multiple extinction-level events: ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions. Each time, our species was reduced to a few thousand individuals clinging to survival. We learned that the universe is hostile, and that survival requires constant vigilance." "But that doesn't explain your military superiority," protested Representative Mox. "Natural disasters don't require advanced weapons technology." "No," Clark agreed. "But we also had another teacher: ourselves. Humanity has been at war for its entire recorded history. We've fought each other with stones and sticks, with swords and spears, with guns and bombs, with nuclear weapons and biological agents. We've perfected the art of killing over thousands of years. The chamber was dead silent now. The assembled representatives were beginning to understand the true nature of the species they had been sharing the galaxy with. When we first detected other intelligent species, Clark continued, we hoped for peaceful contact. We wanted to believe that intelligence would lead to cooperation, that advanced civilizations would be peaceful. But we also prepared for the possibility that we were wrong. The hegemony of Zatar, whispered Ambassador Veltar. The Vorthon Collective. The reports say they simply disappeared. They made the same mistake the Caltharians almost made, Clark replied. They assumed that because humans appeared peaceful, we were weak. They learned differently. The red dots on the galactic map began to pulse, and new information appeared beside each one. Weapon specifications, fleet compositions, troop numbers. The scale was beyond comprehension. The human military, Clark explained, consists of over 50 billion active personnel across 12,000 vessels and 3,700 installations. We maintain strategic reserves that could fight a galaxy-wide war for over a century. We have weapons that could sterilize entire systems, and defenses that could withstand the combined might of every species in this chamber. But why tell us this now? Asked Quilnara. Why reveal your capabilities? Because, Clark said, the Caltharians have forced our hand. Their attack on civilian installations has triggered our military protocols. As of this moment, humanity is at war with the Caltharian Empire, and when humans go to war, we don't stop until the threat is eliminated. The chamber erupted in panicked discussions. The implications were staggering. If humanity could deploy the kind of military force Clark was describing, they could reshape galactic civilization at will. General, Quilnara said, raising her voice above the chaos. What does humanity want? What we've always wanted, Clark replied. To be left alone, to live in peace, to protect our people and our way of life. But if that's not possible, then we want to ensure that those who threaten us understand the consequences of their actions. And the Caltharians? Clark's expression hardened. The Caltharian Empire has 72 hours to surrender unconditionally and turn over those responsible for the attack on New Geneva Station. If they refuse, we will demonstrate why peaceful species don't threaten human civilians. The chamber fell silent once more. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer hiding. They were no longer pretending to be weak. They were revealing themselves as what they had always been, the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, Clark said, turning to address the entire assembly. I want to be clear about something. Humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to be left alone to live our lives in peace. He paused, letting his words sink in. But if anyone else decides to test our resolve, if anyone else chooses to attack our civilians, if anyone else mistakes our desire for peace as weakness, they will learn the same lesson the Caltharians are about to learn. We are not victims. We are not weak. We are not defenseless. As General Clark turned to leave the chamber, his final words echoed through the silence. We are humanity, and we remember everything. The session ended with the assembled representatives sitting in stunned silence, each contemplating the same terrifying realization. They had been sharing the galaxy with sleeping titans, and someone had just woken them up. In the days that followed, the Caltharian Empire's surrender would be swift and complete. The galaxy would enter a new era, one where humanity's true nature was no longer hidden, and every species would have to decide how to coexist with the most dangerous force in known space. The battle had been won long before anyone knew it had begun. Now, the real war was just starting. The war for peace in a galaxy that had forgotten what true power looked like.